We're excited to have you here, and we have a great panel of district leaders joining us today to talk about how they use app data from Lightspeed Insight to make better and more informed technology decisions at their districts. It's one of the most complex times in K-12, as you all know, with the aftermath of things like app explosion with COVID and challenges around everything from budget to compliance, instructional decisions, and AI and screen time. So we know there's less budget and more pressure from leadership and boards to answer really tough questions, and that's why visibility is really key. So understanding what apps are being used isn't just a technical question, it's also an instructional and financial one. And that's why we're here with two district leaders who are going to talk about how they're using app data to bring more clarity to that decision making and strengthen collaboration across departments. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Carrie and Luke to introduce themselves.
All right. Good morning. Well, at least it's still morning here where I'm at. I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm representing Northside ISD. I am currently the Director of Academic Technology here, but I've been in this district for a good number of years as a teacher, a campus administrator, and then have been in this position since 2021.
Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Mund. I'm the manager of educational technology for Denver Public Schools. I spent 10 years in the classroom as a technology and social studies teacher before transitioning to being an ed tech instructional coach. And now I get to manage our team, and I do all app reviews for instructional technology in Denver. So anything that's used with students or teachers in the classroom comes through my team. So that's why we're excited to have use of data.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us today. We're going to run a quick poll to get a sense for what is your biggest visibility challenge currently at the district? So, you know, like I mentioned, visibility into how budget is being spent, what apps are in use, are our apps compliant, AI, and things of that nature. So we'll wait for those results to come in. So far leading with compliance, but it's kind of a close tie across the board. Kept leading with compliance and then app visibility. And budget and AI are tied. Great. All right. So, with visibility into apps being one of the leading answers here, we'll start there with our panel. I'd love to hear from you guys. What challenges were you facing in understanding your digital ecosystem, and why has visibility become so critical right now at Northside in Denver?
Okay, well, I'll go first. So it was like many things, it's not just one thing, it's many things, and those many things all happening at once. So we also, along with several districts, went one-to-one during the pandemic, during COVID times. Prior to that, we'd had a cart model at our various campuses, but all of a sudden we had this pot of money that we were able to use and purchased all of these devices and all of the apps and all of the platforms that came along with that. And so, as we know, that money didn't last forever. It started to go away. And, kind of what compounded that issue is our district is a really large district. We're the fourth largest in Texas as of right now, but we're getting surpassed and we're actually shrinking. And this district hasn't had that experience in quite some time. We were the district that was opening 3 to 4 campuses a year for a while. And now we're questioning whether we need to have all of those campuses open. So in Texas, our funding model is based solely on daily attendance, daily student attendance. And so when you don't have as many students to come to school, you don't have as big of a budget. So really we were looking at, a budget issue across many different areas, and then technology support being one of them. Especially now, because we could see that that was coming, but it was short-sighted. We had the devices, we knew we'd have them for a few years before we had to start looking at purchasing, but now all of a sudden, like all of them are needing to be needing to be purchased. Great numbers, not just a couple of campuses here and there that we've deployed or a few different programs, but several thousand, in the tens of thousands, in some cases, in some of those devices at one time. So certainly budget, and so we need to make some critical decisions, and we need to know what's being used and what's not being used, and not base our decision on feelings and emotions tied to the device that we have or the apps that we really like to use, but what's actually moving the needle for our students. And that coupled with some recent, changes in legislation in Texas that requires more visibility for parents, this just became something that we really needed to harness the power of a program like Lightspeed Insight so that we could get those answers in fact.
Yeah, for sure. We experienced the same thing in Denver that we just had a plethora of devices, but then also with all those devices came a million apps. And we have a law in Colorado. I love all my people who put compliance because that's like what I do all the time. We have a law in Colorado that we have to list every app that we're using in the district on a website that's clearly visible for our community. And so that used to be just a website page on our website that one person managed, and you'd have to submit this like pretty janky form to get your app on there. And most staff didn't even know that that was a thing, right? They went through an annual training, but did they actually think that they had to report theirs? No. And so it was a janky process. And then the person who was leading that process left the district. And so then it didn't get maintained for a couple of years. And so we decided just to scrap that whole thing and have better data. And so that's where we started engaging with Lightspeed. And through that process, we were able to identify over 1,000 apps through all of our different data sharing, all of our different usage and all of that. And that just was mind blowing to us that we knew that it was a problem, but identifying 1,000, and I know that there were things that we were using that we didn't know, was definitely something that we wanted to take care of. And so we started an internal review system to make sure that all of our apps were compliant with Colorado law, and including we have a digital accessibility law that took into effect July 1 of this year. That means that we need to have apps at the WCAG 2.2 AA level. It's very helpful then to have one process that we can go through step by step, all of our review teams, and then one place to track it all. And so we have our Lightspeed page visible for our community as our academic technology menu. So everybody knows to go to the ATM to be able to see that. That's how then we communicate across our teams, that humanities teams knows to go check that. Our math team knows to go check that. And then if they're missing anything, they know how to submit. And so it's just been a great system for us to be able to track and manage all of our apps. And I'm happy to say that we went from over 1,000 down to 400 approved now.
Awesome. Whole lot to dig in with there, but we know from our internal research that districts have on average 2,000 apps in use, and many districts can't name exactly what are all of those apps and how are they being used? Are they underutilized? Which are paid versus free, etc. So lots to dig in there. I think this is a good transition into kind of higher level. After getting this visibility, what has been your experience with budgeting? How has that changed budgeting and renewals at your districts?
So I'd like to say that we've completely changed everything, and like nobody questions anything anymore, and we never have to have those conversations. We just use the data, but we know that's not accurate, right? Because I said something earlier about separating the feelings from the data. And for whatever reason, apps generate a lot of feelings and a lot of emotion. People get really attached to the one thing that they're using, and they're seeing success with like maybe their group of kids or their campus. But when we're looking at a district, especially one our size, we're looking at quite an investment there. So one of the first things that we did was we got everybody trained that serves in our curriculum and instruction department, really those leaders that make the decisions about what gets purchased. Those instructional materials, the partner, apps that go with them, or just some supplemental apps as well. During the trainings, we would show them the data, we would pull up some examples, and I got this question a lot. Well, is that good data? And I wouldn't be able to answer that for them. I was like, I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because I don't know what the intention was of buying this. If your intent was for every student to get into this app daily, then no, this is probably not good data because this is showing that only half of our kids are getting in it daily. If your intention is for teachers to have access to the app, and really just use it more instructionally with students in small groups or maybe just kind of modeling, then you're overpaying because you're paying for students and teachers. And so maybe we need to go back and we need to have some conversations with the vendor. And then after that, we onboarded our campus leaders. So we created an admin role for elementary principals and then the academic deans at our middle and high schools. And they had insight into just their campus because not every purchase is made at a district level. A lot of them are, but some of them are at that campus level. Or they have teachers or individual teams making purchases, on behalf. And so now they have some visibility into their particular campus. And so those opportunities to have the discussion in that collaborative space have been growing and have been changing, especially now that we're not just talking about a budget shortfall happening, but we're actually like in it now. And we're like, okay, we kind of forecast this was going to happen, but now it's happening. And so those conversations are becoming more frequent and they're becoming less about finger pointing and, well, it's your fault because you're the one that wanted this or, that kind of thing. And people are making more thoughtful decisions. And that's really just on the instructional side. Then you add the compliance in there with, similar to what Colorado has, with the passage of the Scope Act in Texas, with, ensuring that we have data privacy agreements signed by the vendors before we have something available, and making sure that we're not just like, oh, yeah, it's fine. The kids aren't logging in, so there's no data being collected, but really educating them on metadata. And, just because they're not logging in doesn't mean it's not collecting data and we have to be in compliance with this law. Um, all of those kind of pieces are happening because we have insight available now and because we have a lot of people in the district with access and can look at that. Prior to that, we weren't having those conversations. We had an app approval process, but it was mostly kind of on the back end. Like, teachers submitted a request and we denied it or approved it, and it just kind of never got talked about again. With Insight, we manage that public library. So everybody can see what's been approved, and if something is pending or not approved, they can see why. And so it's pretty clear cut now. This company won't play ball. They're not going to sign a data privacy agreement. They want us to pay them $1 million before they do it. And that at the same time, that's helped us have some conversations with some of our vendors that, I'm like, hey, you're not going to be able to do business with us anymore if you're not willing to kind of like meet some of those compliance pieces or be able to kind of your data and our data line up a little better.
Yeah, for sure. In Denver, budget's definitely an issue. Same thing that we're facing, declining enrollment, and we just want to be really good stewards of the public's money, right? So, through the process of identifying, these 1,000+ apps that we're using, we were able to partner with our purchasing team and get every single transaction in the district that was a software purchase, including using our purchase cards. And we had $21 million that we were spending coming out of the pandemic on software of various sorts. So it was an eye-opening amount of money, and with how many apps we have, it really helped paint a great picture of the ecosystem in Denver Public Schools. And we were able to take that to the senior leaders, and they were able to help us with making some tough decisions, like not doing software purchases on P cards anymore, right? We had tons of, $150 purchases of this blah, 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 because the principal didn't care that it was just $150. Here's my P card. If it makes you happy, I don't care. And then let's just move on, right? And so we really wanted to focus on having a select number of tools per use case. So our goal is to have 2 to 5 tools per use case. So like say K5 tier 1 math supplemental instruction, right? So that would be like 4 tools that we have. But then for intervention, for that. So tier 2 K5 math, we'd have 2 or 3 tools that would be available. And we don't want to go beyond that because we don't want to have too many things that our teams are trying to support. And we want to make sure that we have the highest quality tools. I love to pick on math apps just because they're a dime a dozen. There's so many of them out there. And so get math apps all the time. I've reviewed several already this school year, and they just don't hold up to the ones that we have on our list. And if we have an inferior tool to the ones that are already approved in on our dashboard, then why would we approve something else, right? And then it's directing those users to the approved apps that have already been vetted, have gone through the data protection addendum with them, have been put into the purchasing system, have everything in place. Let's use those more, because oftentimes what we're seeing is that teachers or leaders are going to conferences, or they're seeing a new app on TikTok or something like that, right? And they're thinking, I want this shiny new thing, when we already have great proven tools approved for them. And some of the use cases we didn't really know, right? So stop motion software, I didn't know we had a need for that in our district, but through the process, we were able to identify a company that we really like, Cloud Stop Motion. They signed a data protection addendum with us. And so they're on our approved list. And now we have like 12 schools that are buying that every single year. And they've been a great partner for us. I didn't know that, but now that we have the insight, we have the data, I'm able to say that and make better financial decisions based off of that. So we're really trying to reduce our costs too by putting our economies of scale together, right? Is that how can, if we have 12 schools all buying the software, how can we get a group purchase for those 12 schools instead of doing 12 individual school purchases? What we were seeing a lot was that we had a lot of by teacher or by school purchases across our ecosystem, and it was just running up all of these charges. And so we're able to use the data that we have in Lightspeed and say, you know, if we have 10,000 students using this tool regularly, why don't we enter into a group purchase agreement with them and be able to do that? A lot of our software is purchased by schools, but we can combine those schools together and be able to get them better deals. And so this year, we're saving over $300,000 for our schools with those group purchases and using the data that we have.
Awesome. Well, there's so much that goes into the visibility and how that ties to budget. So, like you both touched upon, our apps compliant, and that goes into whether you want to renew or purchase apps. And let's dig into kind of the instructional impact a bit further. Um, can you both talk about how usage data has helped you connect technology decisions to instructional impact and kind of improving that collaboration across different teams?
Yeah, so definitely. So we've had a few initiatives in the district, like I'll just use this blended learning initiative that our elementary campuses were really heavily involved in for the past several years, working with different, vendors and speakers, and exploring the different models and how to use the devices more effectively in their classroom. And so we were able to create dashboards on Insight. So one of the great things that I love about Insight is you can dig deep into like a particular app or a particular campus and get some information, but you can also create these dashboards that gives you a real quick visual, just kind of like a representation that you can kind of follow, each day or each week or whatever, to kind of see what the trends are. And so we created dashboards with just these blended learning campuses and really started looking at like what their top 10 apps were that they were using. And so campuses that are experiencing a lot of success could learn from others by seeing what they were using, and they were not always using the same things, right? I've worked with like our departments that handle, our title budgets and our state comp ed budgets, to create dashboards for them so that they can make sure tier 2 interventions are being done during instructional time and not just when the kids go home and maybe have their device at home. And a lot of it has just really been spent working with individual departments or individual people on, let's read the data. So you pull up the data, and maybe at first blush it's like, oh, this is terrible, like nobody's using it, we need to stop buying it right now. That might be an answer. It might be something we want to look at, or we have the wrong subscription, right? We may need to reduce that or focus on teachers and not teachers and students. But another question is, are they not using it because they don't know how? So let's look at the training. Did you roll something out that was beautiful and bright and shiny and was going to change the world, but you didn't tell anybody about it? Or you didn't figure out a way to have them weave it into their already cramped day, right? So the more tools you push out, do not does not mean that you're going to have immediate success with that. You've got to make sure that the teachers understand where this fits in, and that they know how to use it. And so we've uncovered some training deficits. And then been able to kind of go in, and that's where my department comes in, because we have instructional coaches and we do a lot of professional learning. And so not only am I managing this dashboard, but I'm having conversations of, we can help you with that. We can get some people into your schools to work with the teachers so that they're utilizing this thing more effectively, and you're going to see those results. And we're starting to like really have that conversation with, we've got to connect the dots. We owe it to our public. We owe it to all of the teachers. If we're telling teachers that, we can barely afford to give them a raise, we need to make sure that we're also not just turning around and spending money on stuff that's not being used or is not being effective. And so if we have high usage with something, but we're not seeing anything move in our achievement, then we need to go back and reevaluate. Yeah, it's being used, great, that's better than not being used, but is it making a difference? Our kids aren't growing. And that's where, Luke talked about math apps, and my gosh, that's true, right? So there's like a million of them. Um, and a lot of them don't have any effectiveness. They're fun, but they don't move the needle. They don't really show the difference. So we have to have that conversation of like, hey, like, we know you like it. The kids think it's fun, but you know, at the end of the day, we're buying this for growth, and we're not seeing that growth.
Yeah, in Denver, when we had 1,000 apps, what we kept saying was that if we're doing 1,000 things, we're doing 1,000 things not well, right? So by having so many different tools and apps, and this teacher's doing this, and it's not even consistent across the school, it meant that we just had terrible data of insight as to what was actually working. So one of our big whys of our project of really limiting this and having a nice approval process was that we would have apps that were aligned to our high quality instructional materials vision and our instructional vision. So we wanted to have apps that were supplementing our math instruction in the way that we were trying to do math instruction, and instead of trying to teach them like drill and kill, just solve math problems so that you can defeat that monster boss that's in the game, right? And so we really wanted to make sure that we had the instructional vision, the high quality instructional materials when it came to digital tools, because we've been working really hard to have our curriculum as HQIM, but we wanted the digital tools to go in alignment with that. So that was a huge part of our why. And also when we had 1,000 apps and we had 19 elementary math apps in our ecosystem, it meant that our math team couldn't support those apps, because every time they went into a classroom, there was a different app, and they didn't want to learn that because then they would learn it for this one teacher, and then they'd go to another classroom and then there would be a different one. And so it basically just became a station in a lot of our classrooms for humanities apps, literacy apps, spelling apps, handwriting apps, right? All these different things that our specialists weren't able to support because they didn't know how to get all of those. So now that we have limited amounts of apps, they know that we have 2 handwriting apps. And so if they see those handwriting apps, they're at least familiar with those. They know how students can use it. They know how to be able to support that in a classroom to make that station rotation the most effective it can be. But then other side of that is that when we're focusing on our apps and we have limited ones, then we can actually know what's working, because we really want to be able to replicate what's working. And when we're doing 1,000 things, there's just so much muddy data that you don't know what it actually is, and especially across schools, right? So if we know that we have 18 schools using this app and we have 20 schools using this app, then we can compare network traffic. We can compare how long each students are engaging on the pages using the Lightspeed portal, right? We know then what the math scores are. We have that access to that data now because we have a more focused vision when it comes to all of our apps. This is also translating into AI for our folks that put in the poll that they want to use AI, is that we have a list of approved AI tools for our students that we're really trying to get them to. However, if you look at our traffic in the system, right, we know that they're still falling back to some of those other AI tools. And so what we're finding is that we're having a lot more success introducing AI approved tools at the middle school level, because by the time they get up to high school, they've already been using something for a little while and they don't want to switch to the approved thing that like the teacher can see what they're doing. They want to be using that other thing on the side, right? And so we're able to make better instructional decisions based off of where our students actually are and what they're actually doing. And we're really trying to push our students using that data to the approved AI tools. And before we didn't really have any insight into that, but now we can actually see it and make better instructional decisions.
Awesome. I know AI is still being blocked at many districts, but a lot are also starting to incorporate it and thinking about what is the best way to incorporate AI. And part of understanding that is getting visibility into how it's being used and how it's continuing to be used with AI policies being implemented at the district. Um, so we've talked a lot about privacy and compliance and that how that ties into a couple of different things like budget and instruction. Privacy and compliance expectations are growing. We talked about the Scope Act in Texas and accessibility laws in Colorado. Let's dig into that further. How has Insight helped you strengthen that accountability and transparency specifically?
What's really nice about Insight is that you can go to any app. You can go to an app that's approved, that's already available. You can look up ones that are being used that haven't been submitted for approval. You can kind of like see like what are people using? What are those new apps? It'll pull that, the top 10 new apps that have hit your district that you may not even know about yet. And you can dig into them. So when you click into that app, it'll give you information about what it is, what its intention is, and then it'll link to their privacy policy and terms of service. And it'll give you insight. It'll also provide that third party kind of look at it and you can look at like how did it rate. So I know kind of going back to AI, we made a significant purchase as a district this year into a very well-known platform for AI. And we did that because we recognize that in order to teach students responsible use of AI, you have to provide some level of access, right? You can't teach that stuff in theory. It just doesn't work well. And so when we were looking at them and meeting with vendors, we were able to see which ones people were already using. And so not only were we able to vet it for safety and for, all of the things that are transparent in that app information, but we were able to see like, we had a 76% adoption rate in this one platform already. They were either using the free version or they were paying out of their own pocket for, an upgraded version. And so when we met with other vendors that were like, oh, you have like 100% of your teachers using this, we could look and be like, not what I'm seeing, can you explain that data and what does that look like? I had a conversation with a vendor just yesterday that's really pushing for a district-wide purchase. And I was like, look, it's not going to happen. We don't have the money for that. But I will tell you, these campuses seem to be using it a lot. So maybe call them. Maybe take a look because that's where I'm seeing the usage in this. And so when we do make a big purchase, the teachers are telling you what they want without telling you what they want through their usage, right? And so at the same time, you can also identify if there's an app of concern. So sometimes, we'll look at what people are using and we'll see something and then we'll go and start looking into it and be like, whoa, like, we need to block this. We need to have that difficult conversation. Whereas sometimes it's something great that we didn't know about. Like to Luke's point, like I didn't know that the district needed this type of app to do stop motion. Nobody told me about that, but now that with the usage of it and starting to look at what was being used out there, it was like, oh yeah, we need to do that. And now we can use that data to help you get a better price, help you get a better deal, and help vendors work with you a little bit more because they're feeling the pinch too. I don't think there's a vendor out there that's just deliberately evil and like, I'm just going to lie to everybody. But they're also trying to sell a product in a time where people are going broke. And they're not, they're looking at, what they can afford and what they can put on their devices. And so sometimes I think there's a tendency to color things one way or the other. And this helps you have a more informed conversation with that vendor and work out a better deal in the best interest of your entire district.
Yeah, to build off of that, when we first had Lightspeed, we had a vendor who got their got a meeting on the calendar with a bunch of senior academic leaders, right? And they were saying about how many thousands of students in Denver were using their tool. And I was able to pull up Lightspeed and I was like, actually, in the last 6 months, you only have had about a third of that usage in our district. And they were like, oh, what do you mean? And so I was able to show them like, hey, here's the usage. How are you measuring how many students are using? Oh, well, we use 3 years of data. And I'm like, those are not active users then. If you're using that senior who graduated 2 years ago, like, don't tell me that they're an active user. So we use it to help keep our vendors honest, just like Carrie was saying. So much so that a lot of our senior academic leaders don't have access to the system, but they know how to chat me and just say, hey, I'm going to go into the meeting with this vendor. What's our actual usage? Or they're saying that this is this. Can you check and can you verify? So very helpful when it comes to renewals or new ones, because ed tech salesmen are ed tech salesmen. They can be great people, and then they're also trying to earn a commission and do all of the things, right? So another thing that we love to use with the Lightspeed portal is listing all of our data protection addendums. So that's a requirement in the Colorado law, yay compliance. And so we have a Google Drive that has all of the master copies of those, but we upload those to our Lightspeed, and that's what communicates approval fully to our purchasing team. So our data protection addendums are not good forever. And so our purchasing team is able to get in a requisition and say, hey, here's the software tool. I'm going to go check it on our academic technology menu and pull it up and then see the DPA is only a year and a half old. That's great. And then they can go on, right? So that they don't need to have any additional emails or checking any place else. They just know to go to the ATM. Our instructional leaders, the same thing. Say, hey, that's not approved on the ATM. You need to submit it for approval, so that we have it. And it's really great for our community that they can actually see what we are signing with each of our vendors, right? And then on the flip side of that is that I really love being able to convey why a tool is not approved. And so that not approved list with the approval comment on there has been so helpful for us. And we really try as a review team to put a lot of information in there so that our teachers, our community, our instructional leaders know why something's not approved. About 25% of our not approved tools are because of digital accessibility non-compliance. So they don't provide a VPAT for us, or they're 2.0 level, which is not meeting the requirements that we have. We can put that and put it right there and say like, hey, this is not anything that we're finding content-wise. We're not making a judgment about the price or anything like that. It's just they don't comply with Colorado law. We can't buy them, like full stop. That's the way it is. And I have that verbiage that I copy and paste into those non-approvals a lot. But that's been really helpful with our community to be able to say, it's not approved because this. Our old system was just a website saying, here's all the things not approved. And then we'd get emails all the time. Why is this not approved? Are you sure? Blah, blah, blah. And we're able to do that. So much so now that when vendors are reaching out and they're saying, hey, I see I'm not approved, we're at a 2.0 level, we've actually done system updates, now we want to do this. Or I have vendors that the salesperson moves from one company to the other and they say, hey, I checked your ATM and I noticed we're not approved, but we actually want to come back. And so we're using that to really have that insight into how we're complying, which companies are complying, which ones are not, posting our public records, being able to do that too. And we find it useful that Lightspeed provides the public VPATs as a tag in the information. There's a lot of different tags in there to convey information from the apps. And so that's helpful for us to be able to go and say like, hey, this is just public. I can be able to search that and find that VPAT without having to email, accessibility@cooltool.com, right? So that we can have that compliance and convey that to our community.
Wonderful. So the approval workflow is such a key piece for many districts, bringing in different teams into the same place, moving out of those spreadsheets and disconnected systems and word of mouth. And so I'd like to share in the chat here a look at our approval workflow so you can kind of click through how that works, as well as it previews some upcoming enhancements coming to the approval workflow, like customizations. And so this will be a good resource for those who are interested in seeing how that works. Just going to drop that in the chat here. Carrie and Luke shared some really great insights. Are there any lessons learned or ways that you envision expanding and growing from here in your usage of the data, taking the data and making it actionable, whether that's for budget, compliance, or otherwise?
Yeah, we talked a lot about apps, but also what's great about Insight is you can look at devices and devices by level, and the types of devices that you have. So, in Northside, we have a few different devices depending on, what level of school. So, we have iPads at, the early childhood level, pre-K, kinder and first primarily, and then at some of our magnet schools and some of our specific programs, as you go up through high school. We have largely Chromebooks after that. But there are some high school magnets that have, MacBook, or they'll have, a different laptop or whatever. So we're able to look at that. So not only are we looking at those instructional apps and that, but we're looking at what it's going to cost to replace everything at once. You bought everything at once, but we had this influx of cash and these different, programs that we could tap into, whereas now it's all coming out of our general budget. So, a $33 million iPad purchase, in another year is probably not going to be sustainable. So now we're able to kind of like look at how the devices are being used, when they're being used, and start to drill down from there on, do we really need to be one-to-one in this grade level or for this purpose or with this device? So I see that that's where a lot of our work is going right now, continuing to have those conversations with the instructional teams. We're in our district, we're moving in that HQIM direction as well. We've been a district that largely wrote a lot of our own curriculum and just purchased instructional materials as supplemental, but we're moving into that HQIM world, which is going to make some of those purchasing decisions easier just simply because they're not going to be in alignment. But, you know, as most things do, those companies will adjust and they will start making more supplemental. They'll start, working around what Texas expectations are. And so we'll have to have those critical conversations, whether or not this is something that's actually supporting the work that's happening in the classroom, or whether this is something that's just purely, for fun or additional. Um, we are making headway with all of the compliance discussions. It's nobody's favorite topic to talk about what the state of Texas will or will not let you do in any, really vein of that, but especially when it comes to apps, especially if it's something that we previously approved and now we're having to go back and be like, we can no longer support that. Those are tough conversations to have with people. Um, and but I think we're starting to make headway with them understanding that it's not an us versus them. We're not just trying to be the no people. We're trying to be the no, KNOW people, and, educate people as far as what they're able to do. It's not just, oh, technology won't let us have it, or whatever. It's no, we can't have it because it collects too much data. They openly admit they're going to sell the data, whatever the case may be. When we do trainings, I tell people, the one thing to remember is ain't nothing for free. Okay. So either you're paying for the protection or they're selling the data to make their money, right? So that is not a compelling argument anymore that something is free. Usually that means that we have to be extra careful with it. And so I think just continuing to educate is going to be a big part of our work.
Going forward, something I'm looking forward to is making other lists of tools using Insight. So we have the ability to create multiple lists. So we have our academic technology menu that I talk about a lot, and that's really what I manage. But our Department of Technology Services has been doing a great job of making a staff technology list. So it's not to be used instructionally. And then we also have operations, right? I didn't know that we had 8 different pieces of software to run our busing system, but now that we have the Insight, like we're able to know that and we're able to make that, but that does not need to be communicated in the same way that instructional technology is. So now we have an operational technology menu in that staff list. And so I'm excited to see how our tech services team can really expand those and use the same functionality to convey the same process, just with different use cases.
Very interesting. Yep, we do have districts who are creating different versions of their public lists, as Luke mentioned, custom versions for different audiences. And Carrie, I loved your note on being the know people, KNOW. Certainly helpful to have data to be in the know. Well, great. I think we have a couple of minutes left to dig into Q&A. See, we've got a couple questions in here.
I can take the one that was directed towards me.
Great.
From Christy, she's asking, what's the strategy in Denver for using 2 to 5 tools per use case? That comes from our chief academic officer. And she is an amazing woman, and she really started that. She said, like, we need to have a limit of some sort. We should have focus of this many. And to hold to that limit, then our specialists or managers from content teams who do our app reviews. I have one person from each of our 12 content teams who do the app reviews. They have a rubric for high quality instructional materials that mirrors the same HQIM rubric that we have for curriculum materials. And so they apply the same thing to the digital materials. And one of the quality criteria is that the app serves our students in a more impactful way than previous apps or apps that have already been approved. So we really want to make sure that it has a value add for Denver instead of just adding something to our ecosystem, that it has to be something that's better. And that's pretty much then how the other ones are written, but that third quality criteria is really our big thing. And a lot of the new tools score very poorly in that indicator, and so then they're not allowed in.
Awesome. Well, that wraps things up for today. I hope you all got some great insights from Carrie and Luke. There is a short survey at the end of the webinar as soon as you close out, so make sure to share your feedback and reach out with any questions. You will receive a recording of this if you have registered, so that will be shared out shortly. And any questions we didn't get a chance to answer, we will follow up with you separately after the call. So thank you guys for joining us today.